Hello and welcome to the very first live Real Vision Crypto Unwrapped, a new show in which we cut through the noise and hype to unwrap developments and their real meaning, leaving you with actionable insights and takeaways for investing in crypto, Web3, and beyond. I'm Leslie Lamb, CMO of CoinFlex. With me here today are Real Vision Global Markets Editor Weston Nakamura and Executive Producer Nico Brugge. Please send us your questions throughout the show. We would love to hear from you. Weston, let's start with a rundown on the crypto markets. What do you have for us today?
Hey, Lizzie. Sure. So just kind of broad-based price action in the wake of the Terra Luna crash. So heading into last weekend's DPEG and the ensuing volatility, we saw BTC spot down as much as 30% to its lows in about 1 week time frame. Ethereum about 40% down at that point. But since then, both spot BTC and Ethereum have recovered about 5%, which is actually more or less in line with the Nasdaq index futures returns of about 4% right now. So there has been somewhat of a recovery or stabilization, as we'll say, not full recovery. Tether has shed another 1 billion in market cap, falling to about 74 billion last 24 hours. And again, this is following the collapse of Luna. So here's a soundbite from an upcoming interview with our very own Ash Bennington that he did with Francis Hunt, the crypto sniper, discussing if we've hit bottom for BTC.
My suspicion is that there's going to be more juice in the jar than people have thought. In the notion that, okay, this is all over, bottom pick. It's likely to be too soon. There is, in most instances, that people want to do bottom picking because you've stopped going down. You usually get a real final leg of pain.
And you can watch the full interview on Thursday on Real Vision Crypto. But let's turn to the main story of today, the Terra fallout. Nico, what do you have for us?
It's been quite a week. So we've learned a bit more over the last 7 or so days. Turns out Terra's Bitcoin sell-off, they sold off roughly 80,000 Bitcoins and have roughly 300 left. There was initial shock to the price of Bitcoin, but it eventually rebounded to the 30K level. This was something that Bitcoin maxis are definitely championing as part of the true nature of Bitcoin. In terms of regulation, there's reports that South Korea is reportedly starting an investigation into what went on with Terra and Luna. And amidst all of that, Duquan is still trying to see how Luna can be relaunched. Vitalik CZ and several other luminaries of the crypto space are supporting a FDIC style reimbursement of funds to the Terra and Luna holders, with reports discussing that they could be reimbursed up to 250,000. But that's still in the works, and a lot more coming on that. And then, emotions have obviously been running high, as we've seen on Twitter and in news reports. There was a report yesterday that someone actually tried to break into Duquan's house. Very, very concerning. But Weston, back to you. What's going on with Bitcoin in your eyes?
Yeah, so the way that I'm kind of just looking at price action, so there's two broad narratives behind the price action of crypto, and therefore I'm just going to use Bitcoin as a proxy for price action. But so one of them is focused on the volatility spill out from within the crypto community, regarding the DPEG. And then the other broader one is the notion that Bitcoin and the Nasdaq are ever more intertwined and highly correlated. And so what I'm trying to do is to look at all of that and figure out which is really driving the price. So if you actually look at these charts, so this first chart that I have, that's basically spot BTC and Eurodollar DEC 22 futures. What that means is those are Fed rate hike projections by the market. And the lower that red line goes, the more Fed rate hikes are being priced in. The more that goes up, the more they're being priced out. You can see after the May FOMC, you'll see some rate hikes getting priced out, but you'll still see BTC drop. And it's very interesting that right at that point, those are no longer moving directionally together. They're actually moving inverse. So that's obviously not really, a particularly good driver. The second chart that I have, this is simply what I just discussed before. This is BTC spot versus NASDAQ futures. They are basically moving pretty much in lockstep. And so the question is, therefore, what's moving the NASDAQ or equities as a whole? And then so the third chart, it's basically the same thing, and I've overlaid USD CNH, that's the dollar versus the Chinese yuan offshore, and I've put it in inverse USD CNH so that when the black line's going down, that's the yuan getting weaker and vice versa. And that is the current driver of risk, risk assets as a whole, and therefore of BTC. So although the timing is coinciding with this, kind of idiosyncratic crypto event, which is by no means a non-event, there are other broader forces at play as well. And so we need to just keep in mind that there is never one single driver, especially when it comes to, global asset classes, especially something like Bitcoin. And currently the Chinese yuan needs to be paid attention to very carefully as well.
Absolutely. And going back to what you were talking about, Nico, earlier, right, regarding this Terra Luna fallout, I think a very big question that's top of mind for, investors and traders right now is, which stablecoin should I be looking to now? There's a big question on whether investors are changing their stablecoin preference from, say, a USDT to USDC or BUSD. But really, this is something that we have to kind of hone in on, which is, do stablecoins satisfy this trifecta of factors? The first one being stability, right? The depegging risk of the stablecoin. The second one being transparency into the riskiness of collateral assets backing the stablecoin. And the third point being redeemability, right? The liquidity risk under market stress. And this is something that, the regulators are also honing in on right now as well, with Hester Pierce saying that the SEC could develop stricter rules around stablecoins due to this UST crash. And we can't forget that earlier last month or 2 months ago, that Senator Pat Toomey actually sent out a discussion draft on stablecoins called the Trust Act, where he encouraged the administration to take a really hard look at stablecoin regulation and Congress's responsibility to outline these broad parameters around this market. And so what's very interesting here is that this Trust Act regulates the payment, or would regulate the payment stablecoin category. And the question is, do stablecoins, or so-called stablecoins like UST, fall under these regulatory parameters? With recent news out of the U.S. Treasury, with Secretary Janet Yellen calling during the Senate banking panel for more appropriate regulatory framework by year end, there is deeper concerns that if this market were to expand much larger than it currently is now, that there's no comprehensive standard for governing the risks of stablecoins as a payment product, and that with significant potential risks to financial stability, that now is the time to put legislation into work that should have what she calls federal prudential terms around it. And so one thing that was really interesting that she mentioned was referencing this report, which is the Financial System Vulnerability Assessment. And really what she highlighted was, these stablecoins, one of the main things that we have to understand is, how redeemable are these stablecoins during market stress, right? We saw for USDT, for example, they saw large redemptions, but at the end of the day, the peg is still holding, and they were able to process those redemptions. And so these are just some of the factors that, from a regulatory perspective, we should be looking to as we, kind of assess the attributes and risks of different stablecoins. So right now, let's go to one of our user questions. This is from our Pro Crypto Tiers Discord community. This person is asking, can crypto bounce back from the current bear market, but also the Luna situation? Can the whole ecosystem absorb this kind of meltdown? Are there any large institutions that you see being vulnerable right now? What kind of risks are we looking to over the next few years? Nico, give us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's quote unquote scary times. Things are down. Thankfully, it's been trading sideways for the last couple days. But I think that, the crypto space has seen things like this before and it's always bounced back. I think like Leslie, you, Jessica, and Ash discussed last week, this might ultimately create a greater foundation for crypto overall. These type of stress tests are only good for free markets. So, definitely still bullish in the long run, but we might be in for some pain over the coming months. Weston, anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, just to follow up with what you just said, Raul always talks about this is what, we have to keep in mind. This is what a 70 vol asset looks like. I just want to say more broadly, this is what free markets look like as well. This isn't what a market looks like when you don't have a central bank coming in with a safety net every single time that there's volatility. Volatility is this is, I mean, it's pain in the short term, but it is, would you rather have, a Chair Powell come out and, pick and choose winners and throw nets under markets and create an artificial, like, that's not the reason for the defeats the full purpose of this entire space. So we can just need to keep that in mind during the bad times, that this is what we also signed up for, and ultimately is it is a good thing that these markets are still relatively free.
And Weston, there's actually another user question as well, this on price action. This person would love to get your take on the ETH and BTC performance and whether we're going to see weakening or strengthening, see that price performance weakening or strengthening over the next months and year.
So the way that earlier I showed the price charts that you really have to keep an eye on the Chinese yuan versus the USD and versus the Japanese yen as well, because it's weakened significantly, and that's really been dragging down risk assets as a whole. So BTC and ETH are both still highly correlated to risk assets. So your view on those are going to be your view on whether or not you think that this is bottom for NASDAQ and for risk assets. What I will say, however, too, though, is that where if you look at like BITO, the ETF, for example, the futures-backed ETF, you start to break through like levels where a lot of the longs that got long, they're now down well over 20% from like if you bought it at its debut and all that back in October, and you see a lot of futures driven selling too. You saw futures driven selling at futures open after this weekend. So you have to really keep a price or keep a very close eye on things like the listed derivatives market in BTC and all that, not just strictly the spot prices in and of themselves.
Thanks for that, Weston. Now, we'd like to wrap up the show here with a section on talking about what we don't have time to talk about, but you need to know. So, Weston, what's your top line story here?
Yeah, what I was looking at was Miami Coin crash. So Quartz reported earlier this week. This Miami Coin is a cryptocurrency is created by Delaware-based City Coins, but it's endorsed by Miami's Mayor Francis Suarez, and it's crashed about 95% from I believe its September peak. And so that kind of has some awkward questions for the city that's been very, embracing of crypto and Bitcoin. Note that Mayor Suarez has been on Real Vision with Raul Pal before. But Leslie, what are you looking at?
So my story is on Bitcoin mining and whether that's back in China. So despite the ban of mining activity in the country from June 2021, the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance, which does a lot of coverage on all parts of the crypto ecosystem, but particularly crypto mining, recently reported that the country has been seeing a resurgence of underground mining activities. This is very interesting over the last few months from access to off-grid electricity and smaller scale operations. I believe China is taking the number 2 spot right now in terms of hash rate activity across Bitcoin mining. So it'll be interesting to dive deeper into that at another point in the future. But interesting that China has resurged as a hub. Onwards to you, Nico. What's your story of the day?
So yesterday, 32 central banks and 12 financial authorities from 44 countries met in El Salvador to discuss the future of financial institutions, banking the unbanked, Bitcoin, and crypto. Obviously, we've seen a lot go on with El Salvador and their adoption of Bitcoin. So definitely something to keep an eye on to see how other countries might ultimately take El Salvador's playbook and run with it. Back to you, Leslie.
So that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us on the first Real Vision Crypto Unwrapped. Subscribe for free to Real Vision Crypto for more analysis on the markets. See you next week.